my mentor. So you said it all. Anyway, so my name is Abbas. I'm Palestinian. But I was born in Jordan, and as Mariam said, I was also a tapper, which means that I'm a graduate of TAP training programs. After graduating for 2 months after graduation, I was in a meeting with the co-founders. They offered me a role at TAP, and it took me that was the fastest decision I ever made in my life. It took no time for me to accept their offer, because when you go through the program of TAP and you see the support, you see the beautiful community that TAP has, you fall in love with TAP and its mission. So yeah, maybe I'll talk a little bit about TAP as well. So TAP started like any business as an idea in the minds of its co-founders, Jafar and Christian. They met while they were doing master's degree at INSEAD, and then they were mentoring Palestinian youth. And as they were mentoring Palestinians, they thought, okay, these guys, they are really smart. They have a lot of potential, but given the circumstances, maybe they don't have as much opportunities. They need guidance, they need support, and that's how the whole idea of TAP started. So we focus on high potential youth from Palestine, and more recently from Jordan as well. They can apply. We have 3 training programs, 3 tracks in software development, digital marketing, and business development. They can apply. Once they apply, they go through a screening process. And if they get accepted, if they pass all the steps, they start the training program with us, which involves a lot of learning in terms of soft skills, technical skills, even on-the-job training. We have amazing coaches, amazing mentors, like Callum, for example. Callum is one of our mentors. And yeah, they help with talents. They support them through the program, even afterwards. And then once they finish their training programs, we start connecting them with companies for fully remote opportunities. Why we decided to make our model for fully remote? Because we want the talents to have better opportunities, but at the same time stay in Palestine or in Jordan, because social impact is one of our main pillars as well. And then I'd like to, of course, introduce Callum. Callum is my mentor. He made a huge impact in my life. And aside from, let's say, Callum the professional, I would start by saying Callum the human being, the person, is an incredible human being. He is there are a lot of things that I could say about Callum, but I would say what stood out to me about him is that the way he sees things, his perspective of things is different than other people. For example, he knows he's privileged, so he sees privilege as a burden, that because he's privileged, he's got to help people who are not. So that tells you a lot about his personality. Callum, I'll leave it up to you. And, yeah.
What a lovely intro. And likewise, I could say 2 million things, probably more, about Anas and how amazing he is. I unfortunately am not a tapper. I've never been through the TAP program, but I've had the joyous experience of kind of getting to know the program kind of probably over the past year or so, actually, maybe slightly less, but getting on that amount of time through mentoring Anas, and it's been an amazing experience. And it's been an amazing experience going through that program alongside Anas, kind of from the sidelines, but then also seeing him land a job with TAP and kind of flourish within that environment and go on to do some incredible things as he is now doing. And just a bit more of a background on me, I guess I kind of come at things from I've been really lucky and fortunate, as Anna says, and privileged really to run recruitment businesses for a long time. I have placed thousands of people into commercial roles within tech across the globe through the teams that I'm lucky enough to kind of manage and lead, and started Zest ultimately with a vision of radically changing the perception of recruitment, because there are so many bad recruiters on there, so many poor experiences that people have going through that kind of job application process. It's a really scary time. It's a really daunting time for people. But there's a whole host of joy that you can find in that, and actually in delivering great experiences. A job and a career is a huge part of someone's life. So making sure that that's well aligned, making sure that people find the right environment and the right team to kind of flourish is where I get a whole host of kind of kicks out of what I do. And yeah, again, it will be an interesting, as Anna says, I try to, and it's a really nice way of introducing me. So thank you again. But I try to view things from a slightly different perspective, because I think, and especially in the recruitment that I do, and we'll go into this in far more detail today, I'm sure, sales recruitment, a CV is useless, really, in outlining the joy and the magic of a human being. And I get so passionate about that, because in Anas's journey, he did not change as a human being. He's developed, he's learned, he's like we all do. But in the way that I think recruitment is viewed, Anas's value would soar being now called a business development manager, but he was always that person. He just now has that title. So, and I might have the title of a founder or a CEO, but it doesn't make me any more valuable than anyone else with it. I've just got a different set of skills, and I've always had those skills, and I've kind of learned things on my journey. So I think it's really important. I'm really passionate about kind of seeing the human being behind the CV and being able to champion that person in order to find truly kind of value aligned environments for them to flourish.
Thank you so much for the thorough introduction, and maybe we can start with the most important point it could be, because as you said, sometimes the CV is useless, or sometimes the CV does not reflect who the person actually is. But then the question arises, which is, what is the alternative then? So if we don't have the CVs of the candidates, how can we know if this candidate is the good fit for the role or not?
So it's a really good question, and I won't take back what I said. The CV is a part of the story, but I think the CV is maybe 10-20% part of the story, because ultimately for everyone's side, in order for it to be a really worthwhile relationship, the candidate in that kind of environment needs to have an idea as to what the job entails, and having that experience and being able to say they've done something before gives them a good opportunity to kind of go into an environment and do it again and develop along that path. In answer to your question in regards to what else can you look at, you can look at the individual, and I think it's very obvious, but there are thousands of recruitment leaders across the UK, across the world, across everywhere. But if this little screen that you had in front of you just said recruitment leader, it wouldn't show half the personality or half the kind of attributes that make me. I launched a business called Zest because I am full of energy. I kind of bring that energy into every conversation. It's such a big part of me, and I think it's really hard to see that. I wouldn't be able to get that across on a piece of paper, and that's what every applicant really has. And it's the system is broken, because if I was looking for a job, the model tells me send a piece of paper with my experience to a hiring manager and hope that person picks that up and thinks Callum's great. But how can they see that? How can they see all of the energy, all the joy, all of the kind of zest that I'll bring to a conversation, and that will fit in some environments, it won't fit in others. So actually, even if I think that's great, other people won't necessarily think that's great, and they're judging me, or people are being judged on a piece of paper that just doesn't tell them the story. So I think video, or being able to, however you display someone's personality, so video, face to face, you can even look at kind of data and look at psychometrics and look at the kind of cultural assessment. We at Zest do something where we look at 5 key attributes of an individual and match that up with the hiring manager. So I can see that Anas is X and the candidate is X, that therefore they're going to probably be a better match for each other. But I would always do that as a secondary or kind of third part of a process, because what you don't want to do is rule someone out because of that. Because Anas, you and I might have a real strong value alignment in some ways, but we might be completely opposite in some ways as well. And that is actually really healthy for a business. Diversity of thought, neurodiversity is all incredibly important within a business. And ultimately, we've built a relationship at us from never meeting. We live in the complete opposite sides of the world, that will have similar perspectives in some areas, different perspectives in others, and all of that is really healthy. So kind of trying to get the whole picture as best as you can, but certainly going away from just judging someone off of two years business development manager experience, because loads of people would have that, but does it tell you whether that person's going to be a good fit for your business or your team? Absolutely not.
Yeah, definitely, and I couldn't agree more with what you said. And you remember when we were discussing this together, and we had the analogy of Messi and Cristiano, and all our about football, because we both love football. When we said that when Messi went to Paris Saint-Germain, he's the greatest player ever. They wanted to win the Champions League, so they brought Messi, but they brought Messi with no passion, with nothing to prove. He has all the technical skills, but he's not basically the best fit for what you're trying to do. And then Inter Miami took him because they want more attraction, more followers, and that was a great decision by them. You launched Add Some Zest over a year ago, and it was all you in the beginning, and now you have around 5 team members, right? Which who are all amazing people. So how did you manage to recruit these people, and what were you looking for when recruiting them?
It's a good question. I think, and I'll just touch back to what you said there about the footballers, because that's another answer to your previous question in regards to, I think so many people, and this is more bespoke to, but it can be both sides. So many people start the journey of, I need a salesperson or I need a sales job, and just jump straight into doing, so jump straight into sending their CV, jump straight into trying to find that salesperson without really thinking what they're trying to achieve out of that relationship. Because a hire is solving a problem for a business, and finding a job, you want to find somewhere where it feels like a real home for you as a candidate as well. And I think really taking some time to think before you launch into that decision is really important. Your analogy about Messi is a great one there. Messi is a attacking footballer who is at the end of his career. If you're looking for someone like Messi, or if you're looking to sell shirts but not looking for someone to score goals, Messi's probably the player that you want to bring into your business. If you want someone who is going to be on the upward curve of their career, and you want to hire someone today that you're going to have and really develop over 10 years, Messi is the last person you should be looking at. That doesn't make him a worse footballer. That just makes him not the right fit for what you're trying to achieve. So thinking before you actually jump straight into searching, what are we trying to achieve out of this hire, and having some slow down before you speed up type thing, I think is really important. And that's a journey that I very much went on when recruiting for us. We've been very patient in recruiting. We could have probably recruited double the amount of people that we've recruited so far, but finding people at this early stage for us, it's really important that those 5 people that we've got within the team have a good amount of knowledge and experience within our space, but also very importantly match our vision and values and really want to make a difference. That's what's really important to me. I could have the best recruiter in the world who has placed thousands of salespeople, but if they're going to do things in not a very zesty way, if they're not going to be kind of, well, we get a real high off of getting a lovely review from someone, or someone saying they've had a great experience with us. That is ultimately what drives us, what gets us out of bed every morning. If someone is great at placing people, but couldn't really give a kind of care in the world as to what that experience for that individual is like. Again, it doesn't make them a worse recruiter. It just makes them not a very good fit for us. So that was what was really important for us, having a mix of experience, but also people who wanted to deliver really positive experiences, wanted to give back, wanted to have an impact on the world when kind of doing what they do. There's probably I'd be interested to get your perspective on that from TAP, because it would probably be really hard for someone to come into the TAP organization and have no care in the world about social impact or actually doing the right thing. Again, doesn't mean they're a bad person, just means they're probably not the right fit for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it also applies to TAP as well, because TAP is a social impact startup. So it's a group of people who believe in the purpose of TAP, who believe in what TAP is doing. And if they don't believe it, even if they have like all the experience in the world, it wouldn't work out eventually. And as you mentioned, mix of experiences, that would take us to the topic of diversity and inclusion. So there is a research by McKinsey that says that 35% of corporations who identified as inclusive and diverse outperform other corporations. But the question is here: what is diversity? Like, is diversity hiring people from different parts of the world? Is it about ethnicity? Is it about male, female, gender? What is it about exactly to you?
Good question. That is a really difficult question to answer. A really good question. For me, diversity is more around diversity of thought. So people, it's interesting you introduced me as someone with a different perspective. And I probably agree with that. And I think diversity to me, and where the joy of that McKinsey stat, or that stat that says those businesses will outperform others, is it is people with different perspectives. Now, people's perspectives are kind of linked to probably where they are in the world. It probably is kind of linked to whether someone is male or female. It is probably kind of linked to whether they have sort of autism or ADHD or a neuro or on kind of any sort of, or identify as neurodiverse. But you still can have a team of all men, or a team of all women, or a team of all different races from every element of the world who are diverse. You can. It just depends. But you kind of want to have a nice balance of all of the above. But it is trying to bring different perspectives into the business, and that is again a real kind of key thing when you're hiring. It's really easy to kind of hire and create a team of clones, because Anas has been brilliant, therefore I want to hire 4 more Anases. That's that unfortunately that's just not the right thing to do, and you will plateau as a business by getting to a point where you've done that. And yes, because everyone thinks the same, so no one's going to be challenging anyone, no one's going to be giving anyone useful feedback, no one's going to be thinking outside the box. And the reason why I say that, and the reason why I'm a big champion of diversity, not only because of the kind of social impact, but it's because the world that we operate within is so diverse. So if everyone within your organization thinks a certain way, naturally it'll be really hard to sell to people who think a different way, because you'll just be banging your head against a wall thinking, why aren't they coming back to me? It's because they're thinking differently, which is, again, nothing wrong with that, nothing right with any element. You just need to have people within your organization, and the more diversity you can get into the organization, the more perspectives you bring into the organization, and therefore more ideas, more feedback, more challenge that you can have internally, which will lead to better outcomes externally. Because guess what, you're dealing and we're operating with a diverse audience. So understanding that audience, understanding how to engage with that audience, understanding how to ultimately what you want out of business. If you're in sales and you want to drive revenue or business, you're only going to do that by understanding your buyer and understanding how they think and operating in a way that engages that individual and kind of is polite and courteous, but also delivers. And I think that's the importance of diversity. So my advice to anyone who thinks about diversity is try and get away from male, female, Palestinian, British, whatever it looks like, and just get into a bit more around what perspective will this person bring to the business, and ultimately how will that help, because it will have positive bottom line impact, even if you are the kind of stereotypical white middle-aged British person who just hires exactly the same people and you think, why on earth are you doing that? So it's looking at the positive impact that has, and I think it's through kind of diversity of thought.
Yeah, the problem with us humans is we always like to go with the easy way. So when you think about diversity, okay, diversity, then yeah, I'll just hire more females, or I'll just, yeah. So that would be diversity to us. And
it comes, I think, yeah, just quickly there, I think it comes from a nice place as well, because I think naturally, as humans, you want to give an opportunity to people who probably have had a similar upbringing to you, or you can kind of see elements of you in them, which is a lovely trait. But ultimately, there just does become a point where you need to bring some more thoughts and more diversity into the business. And I don't think that the toughest part is the start of that, because unless I'm being challenged when making a hiring decision and someone in our team is saying, Callum, are you hiring that person because they're like you, or are you hiring that person because you actually think they're the best candidate for the role and the business? I think unless you've got that challenge internally, it's quite hard, because there's natural bias, there's natural kind of preferences as humans, but getting those people in and having diversity within the business, I think over time it really compounds and grows, and there's a bit of a snowball effect with it all.
Yeah, yeah, and I would just quote a TED talk that I've watched on YouTube. There was a phrase there that said, when a company or a firm is smashing against a wall, what they would do is they would do one of two things. Either they do more of the same things, or they do less of the same things. But what they need to do is actually to start doing new things, doing things differently. And that's the whole point of like going back to the title of the webinar, which is how to basically see the human behind the CV when making a recruitment decision. So assume I'm a hiring manager and I'm hiring for a certain role, and yeah, guide me through how can I basically assess these candidates with the CVs, because you said the CV is like 10% to 20% of the process, but what about the other 80%?
Yes, it's so different and so subjective per business, but I would try and break it down to two areas. I try and move away from experience and move more into experiences, and I'd probably be looking at, with that hiring manager, identifying skills that are really important for that role, and also skills, again, something that's really useful with diversity is identifying skills that actually don't really matter in the role. So we only recruit salespeople, so most salespeople are going to be probably a little bit more extrovert, etc. But not everyone. I've seen some really good introvert sort of salespeople as well. So you can easily make assumptions, but identifying what skills aren't particularly useful. So, for example, a developer might not need to be that social. So that could be a really good opportunity to hire someone on the autistic spectrum. And again, the autistic spectrum is a spectrum because it is so wide and diverse, etc. So there could be, I would have autistic tendencies and I'm mega social. So you can't necessarily look at that in such a linear fashion, but looking at skills and looking at your company's core values and what's important to you is where I'd start on that journey, rather than experience, because you can break down those skills and you can get skills in so many different ways outside of the work world as well. So for example, a problem solving skill could be something that is derived in sales, but it also could be something that's derived in a passion for puzzles or something outside of work. And looking at experiences as well as experience within the workplace is so important. A really underutilized viewpoint is looking at like just experiences that we all go through in life. So parents, for example, are there's a whole host of skills that people will get on that parenthood journey around leadership, around multitasking, around trying to sort of manage time management and managing a whole host of things that people just get through going through life. And actually that should absolutely be looked at when going through the hiring process. So looking at skills and looking at where can someone get those skills both in and outside of the workplace in order to kind of look at the candidate that we're looking for. And then in the assessment process, it's right, we found that person who we think can bring the right skills to the table. How are we going to assess that person and what are we going to assess in them to try and make sure that we're hiring the right person, and that in these 3 conversations or however many interviews you want to have, you can assess that person to the right level, but you can also mitigate the risk of making a bad decision from both sides: the candidate joining a company they're not very happy with, but also the employer hiring someone that they're not very happy with. And I think a lot of employers and a lot of hiring managers, and again, this might be a very generalist subject or statement, don't really have any idea what questions they're asking or why they're asking them. That's my opinion. I think a lot, especially in sales, and as you or I could meet and we could talk for an hour about football, and I could think he's a really nice guy and I really like him, I'm going to hire him, but I haven't actually assessed whether you can do the job. I just like you, which is one part of the journey. But if I wanted someone that was coachable, I'd want to make sure in the process I do something that assesses your coachability. Now that could be, Anas, can you do a presentation on something you're really passionate about? It could be Cristiano Ronaldo, and then I say, actually, Anas, I really like this. What I didn't like was this, that, and this. Did you understand that feedback? Yes. Okay, well, go away. I'll give you 10 minutes and then present back. So I can see, have you taken that feedback? Have you acted upon it? And therefore, I'd at least have some idea whether you are coachable. I wouldn't have every idea, but I'd at least see how you'd respond to that. And if that was important to me, or if that was one of our values, for example, or it was linked to what we were looking for, I would have a better understanding of you as a candidate, rather than just thinking you're a really nice guy, you talk through your experience, you've clearly been successful somewhere else, so I think you'll probably be successful here, rather than actually understanding, do you bring the right skills to the table, and can I categorically say that I have assessed that properly through the process.
Yeah, and just a quick note from my side. We will leave like 20 minutes at the end of the last 20 minutes will be open for questions. So you can leave your questions in the chat, or like when we are open for questions, you can just raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask your question. I would say, just to summarize, that when recruiting someone, when hiring for a vacancy, what you should do first is you should identify what actually matters the most to you and to your company, and then upon that you can build your assessment. You can build your even your hunting or for the right person upon what actually matters to you and to your company. And also, like CVs, I would say we all kind of lie in our CVs, don't we? I mean, I don't know what you think of that, but I think we all exaggerate or a little bit in our CVs. One last topic maybe we can discuss is what are the benefits of hiring in overlooked communities, and what are the strategies that you would suggest for a successful diversity recruitment?
It's a good it's a good question. Quickly on CVs, because I say a lot of bad things about them. I think if you're putting together a CV, try and make it, especially if you've got experience, try and make it as factual as possible, in terms of any quantifiable numbers or figures or anything that can't really be a lie, because actually that's what people are really looking for from the CV. But again, that's why it's important to tap into that, because that will be so subjective. If you've delivered something in one environment, you might have delivered that with a load of help, or it just might, different environments are different, but try and make that as kind of quantifiable as possible. In terms of recruiting in different geographies, and just communities, I think now is arguably the best time to do that. I think COVID brought a whole host of stress to the world, and it was a completely unprecedented time. And now relationships, or even things like we're doing now, are so much easier or so much more commonplace than they were, which makes hiring in lots of different geographies, especially with different, whether it's deal, remote, whatever it is, that actually takes away any of the faff or difficulty of hiring someone in a different country to where you are. But ultimately, where I think it's amazing is it massively increases the talent pool, and it massively increases the diversity of that talent pool. Traditionally, when you were recruiting, one of the big criteria around me recruiting for my team or for a team was, are they within a 20-mile radius of the office? Now you can look at, are they within a, I don't know, 200,000-mile radius of the office? It doesn't really matter. And you had such a small talent pool to pick from, and you were trying to get the skills and the different things that you identified from that talent pool. It was a real challenge. Whereas now, if people are looking to bring more diversity of thought into their business, if people are looking to widen their talent pool, if people are looking to bring a whole host of, and are going to open their eyes around skills and experiences that people can bring to their workforce, then we live in the best working world and infrastructure now in order to make that happen. So being able to open you up your eyes to different perspectives, different worldly views, and just a much wider kind of pool of talent. I think we live in such a magical time for that perspective. It's such a joyous time. The thing that I will say with it, because it's quite new, and because COVID only happened a few years ago and the working world is so quick to move, is making sure that you, as an organization, as a hiring manager, have the infrastructure and a clear plan as to how you're going to make and include that individual into your environment. Because people talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. The most important thing for me is the inclusive part, because it's all good and well what traditionally happened. I'll talk 5 years ago. In a very male, 16% of the IT sales world are female, so there's naturally a big issue there. What typically happens when people come to me and say, "Callum, we want more women to bring more women into our sales team," that's great, but everything in their sales team, everything in regards to the inclusiveness of that, was so focused on like the male stereotypes. They play football on a Wednesday and they go drinking on a Thursday, and you just think is we can attract more women into the environment, but it's not going to be inclusive. And we're gonna, you want them to, and you want everyone within your organization to feel heard and wanted. And I think that's really important. I think the inclusive part of diversity and inclusion is the most important part. If you're going to hire someone in a different geography, understand what they're looking to get out of the kind of working working relationship, understand what's important to them, and make sure you've got everything in place as a team to make them truly feel as part of your team, make them feel heard, because there's a whole host of joy that comes with diversity, but it will only be realized if you listen and if you open your ears and you allow people to have a voice. And I think that's still under thought of when hiring internationally or from different talent pools. I might be me being harsh. You might have a better lens on that than me, Anas, but that's just my experience, whether it's hiring. And when you make these decisions, there's a whole host of things that you need to think of. Mariam and I were talking about neurodiversity. If you hire someone with autism into the team, I do a lot of fundraising for the National Autistic Society, and through that interview process, if I was interviewing someone on the autistic spectrum, I would want to send them the questions of every meeting before the meeting, so they've had time to prepare, because their brain, the joy of neurodiversity, will think very differently to my brain. So you might be able to ask me a question now, and I feel super comfortable answering that. If I was asking that of someone on the autistic spectrum, they could think of probably much better things than me to say, but they'd probably just need a bit of prior warning to think of those things. So making sure that your environment is truly inclusive, making sure your recruitment experience is truly inclusive, is so important. And I think we live in a wonderful world where we can hire internationally, but I think because of that, there's more complexity that we need to think around before we kind of pull the trigger and make that hire.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a matter of, as you said, creating the right environment, putting the right people in the right place, I guess, and guiding them if they need guidance, or at least understanding how could you get the best out of them, and that's something in. So just one last question from my side, I promise, and then I will open questions for everybody.
I've got one more point as well on that. And sorry, everybody, if you've got any questions, but you go first, Anas, and then I'll.
So my question is, your LinkedIn summary, the first thing it says, I'm super passionate about getting the best out of people. So how do you do that?
Try and understand people, I think, first. Try and understand what's important to people, what makes people tick. Understand that that's different for everyone. And I think it's a really interesting question, and I wasn't expecting you to answer that. And I've never really get answered that. I think I've again, from a position of privilege. So I got into an environment. I was lucky to be managing director of a business at 24 years old, and I thought I wanted to get into work to earn lots of money, have a nice house, have a flash car, and I did that, and it didn't make a difference at all in my life. I get far more joy out of getting positive feedback, or someone saying nice things about us, or feeling like I've made an impact in the world. And unless someone understands that about me, they can never get the best out of me, because someone could just give me, if I won the lottery tomorrow, it wouldn't make me happy. And I say that through potentially a really privileged lens, but it just wouldn't. I said on a podcast recently, if someone offered me £50 million for Zest, I wouldn't take it, because I've got money at the moment that I don't spend. Why do I need £50 million that I don't spend? What's important to me is making a difference. What's important to me is my friends, my family, relationships, people like yourself. And that's far more important to me than money. So how do I get the best out of people? I try to understand what their why is, what makes them tick. And I think if you do that and you take time to understand people, the impact that you can make is just far more powerful. So yeah, it's a good question, but I would take a lot of time getting to know the real human being, and from there I try and act in a way that maximized my value out of a two-way relationship. The bit that I wanted to say quickly before any questions. Well, one quite cool little tip, or one thing that I try and recommend all the time, is if you're trying to bring diversity into the business from any particular group. So if, and you have been fortunate enough to already hire within that group. So if it was hiring a tapper who is ideally female or whatever, don't make sure that person who you've already got in the business is part of the interview process, is part of the hiring panel. As a candidate coming into an interview and seeing, I don't know, 4 middle-aged men from the United States, when you're a woman in Palestine or Jordan or whatever, and if that's what you want to hire, make sure that you've got people in the interview process or part of the panel who can share their perspective, because that is really valuable from a candidate coming in, being able to ask questions from someone with a similar perspective. Still valuable having people who view things from a different perspective. But so many people, again, say to me, want to hire more young people or more women or whatever, and you can't discriminate. We'll never discriminate. We'll always find the best available person. But then don't say that and have a sort of hiring panel of 10 people that none of them match what you're looking for, because it's going to be really, it's not going to be very inclusive for a candidate coming into that working culture and environment.
Okay, so now we'll open up for questions. If you have any question either to Callum or to me, please raise your hand, unmute yourself, and go ahead. Yes, Noor.
Hello everyone. This is me, Noor Khan from Pakistan. Well, I have one small question from the Callum. Sir Callum, would you like to let us know that what factors should we consider while hiring a candidate? Uh, it happens sometimes when we hire someone with more qualification, with more knowledge, with more experience, but still we are not aware because it happened with us in the middle of operation. People left the job. So how or what factor that we should consider while hiring someone uh, in our job?
So what factors to consider to make sure that person stays and doesn't leave?
Yes,
I
that's
think
my question.
yeah, it's a good question. I think that from both sides, and I said this earlier, Noor, that people will lie in their CV potentially. I also think that companies can lie in the interview process as well. I think it can be, it's kind of like dating to some degree. Everyone shows their best side, so everybody shows the best side of them. The business tries to be something that they're not, and the candidate tries to be something that they're not. So being able to break down any barriers, being able to understand first as a business what, I don't know if you have kind of values or anything that you stand by as an organization, understanding those and being able to assess the candidate based off of that, but also being incredibly transparent as a leader and as a business to make sure that the candidate sees the bad as well as the good, understands what that is in the same way that I think if you do that as a business leader or as a hiring manager, the candidate will probably share the same. And I think the kind of the process needs to be long enough where you can actually really get to know that individual, really get to understand what factors kind of make that person tick, and then make an informed hiring decision. So I think the actual factors, Nora, are quite dependent on you, but trying to be as transparent as possible through that hiring process, trying to make sure that you've got an accurate way of um, of assessing those things, and trying to simulate as much as you can what the working environment will be like. Make sure they get to know the team, make sure they get to know exactly what they'll be doing every single day, I think that mitigates a lot of risk of people starting and then the job not being as expected and then leaving, or whatever that looks like.
And is there any process or factor that we can apply or we can avail in our organizational culture to improve our productivity?
To prove your productivity is difficult. I think it's a really good question. As I say, I think it kind of goes back to the answer that I gave Anas in regards to how do I get the best out of people, because
Mm.
that is effectively what that statement is saying. How can I get the best out of the team? How can I make the team as productive as they can possibly be? I would make sure wherever you can, or that you ask for as much feedback as possible. And it might not be common sense. Sometimes taking a step away, or sometimes encouraging people to do less, can actually get more. And the best example I can give in regards to that is the impact from a kind of employee benefits perspective. And this is very American, this is very Silicon Valley, and now is spreading the unlimited holiday employee benefit, that actually companies started giving unlimited holiday, and that made productivity soar. So it's quite interesting, and that is purely based off of understanding people, giving people the freedom and flexibility to kind of thrive and be productive. And I think unless you really ask your teams as regularly as possible, what's getting in the way, what could we be doing more as a team to help, what are you frustrated, what are you frustrated at in the workplace? If you start understanding all of these things, again, it's just through diversity of thinking a different way to maybe someone in the team. There might be something that's really frustrating your sales team or your tech team that you just haven't necessarily thought of, because you probably haven't asked them. And it's something that I'm liable for. I don't ask enough feedback, and now I make sure that I ask so much feedback that it starts annoying my team. So that's probably what I do. In order to answer that question, you're going to have a really deep understanding of your team and what makes them tick.
Okay, thank you very much, Kalim, for your insights upon my questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank
Any more questions? Come on, guys, don't make me ask more questions. So whatever comes to your mind, any question you do have to Callum, just you only have to unmute yourself and ask. Mariam.
Hello. My question would be, what would be a way maybe for people that have, let's say, different, let's say autism or ADHD or something, how would they be able to communicate that with, let's say, higher management or with their supervisor or whoever is in charge?
So it's a really good question. I think it's a really difficult one to answer, and it's something that is becoming far more prevalent, I think, in business today and society today. Actually, I think people have got a much better understanding of themselves and what makes them tick. Or there's a lot of kind of noise, especially around ADHD specifically. And I think what I'd always encourage people, if I was going to give blanket advice, is to be as transparent as possible with it and really celebrate everyone's differences, because ADHD will be a superpower if you use it correctly, but it's difficult. People might not know how they can best. So I would say I have ADHD. I haven't been diagnosed, but that's just I would certainly have ADHD tendencies. And understanding myself, whether I do or not, to be fair, but understanding how my brain works and really being transparent with that with the people around me, I think has led to much better outcomes. I'm probably not going to be a detail person, so being super honest about that and saying, actually, in that scenario, Mariam or Anas or Noor or whoever, you're probably going to need to take the lead there. But where I'm probably going to add the maximum value in this instance is in here. So wherever you can put me in that situation, I'd really appreciate that. Or that's probably where I'm going to add the kind of where I'm going to be my best. So I guess properly understanding yourself and being able to share that with the people around you is important, because if you or I, Mariam, have ADHD, it's not on other people to understand that. To some degree, people will have an understanding, but it's and also how that represents itself will be very unique to us. As I talk about autism, it is a spectrum. Someone could be labeled as autistic, but they can be it can affect people in so many different ways, and it's a superpower. But you've got to be able to kind of transparently tell people that wherever you possibly can. And I think if you open up about things, I've got a real high view of humanity, so I think people will understand. People will try and make people's life easier, and people will try and help. But again, transparency is key, I think, if I was to give kind of blanket feedback there.
Thank you. No, that's amazing advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here, Anna. Feel free to go. Noor, do you have any more questions, because you raised your hand?
Hi, Anas. I have a question as well from you. Not a question, a statement, or an affirmative statement. I just want to ask that what is the vision of TAP from you? What does vision do?
The vision of TAB. So the vision of TAB
Yeah.
is basically that we want to create not just job-ready people, but we want to create leaders for the future. We strive to make these guys, these tappers, entrepreneurs. And if you think about it, it's part of a growth loop, let's say, because if these guys became entrepreneurs, they will come back and hire more tappers. So the idea that we want to build leaders for the future, and not just in Palestine, not just in Jordan, but expand in the whole MENA region, potentially.
That's good. And Kalam, if you allow me to share my views upon hiring a person, because the question I asked that was to understand your perspective of hiring or recruitment. Or what I do or what we do not consider in Pakistan, not in Pakistan, especially once I had been a recruitment head in a company. I would like to share that insights with you. When I would hire a candidate, while interviewing a candidate, I would not consider his knowledge, experience, or qualification. I would go for a candidate's character. If what I think, or in my perception, if a person have a good character, he can stay with you for a longer, even if he is weak in a skill or qualification for the particular seat. We can train him, but we don't need employees that come at 9 a.m. and goes to 5 p.m. We need an asset in our company. That is my strategy while hiring people. Not that was I used to do like that.
Yeah,
Now
that makes sense. The only thing I would say on that is it's a very sensible approach, looking at character as well as experience. The only thing and the only place that would fall down is for both sides is if a role specifically needed experience or kind of really high level skills. So I'd absolutely agree in the kind of more entry level sides of business. But if someone needs a engineer, my character could be really positive, but I've got no idea what I'm doing in the role. So there needs to be some degree of experience. But I'm with you on there's only two sides to me that make up a successful hire or a successful candidate. It's skill and will. So skill, can they bring the necessary skills, and a lot of that comes outside of the work environment. And then will, as you say, is kind of how hard can they work, how much passion are they going to put into this. The only thing I'll say as well, and this might be a very 2024 viewpoint on things, and it's not something that I'm very good at doing, is the amount of time that someone puts into something isn't necessarily relative to the outcome. I.e., I'll say this from I work from 7 till 7 every day. I love working. I'm a workaholic, but there are people that can get much better outcomes than me from about 5 hours in the day, and I'm incredibly jealous of those people. And there's diversity in understanding that, because actually if they can do and they can achieve what they can do in 4 hours, kind of fair play to them. And actually that should be celebrated and not kind of looked down upon because they're not doing the traditional 9 till 6 or whatever we want to. But it sounds like a very sensible approach, looking at character over experience, certainly.
Yeah,
So
I think the time is about to go.
no, go ahead, Noor. But just because I saw that we had also Ahmed, he raised his hand. If he has a question, please go ahead, Ahmed. Yes, Ahmed.
Okay, if there is more time, I can. Thank you, Carl, for every information you've been shared. It will be really appreciated. But my question is actually about the strategy, because I heard transparency, be transparent a lot. That's very good and working well for me from a long time. But right now, actually, it being like a pancake, a pancake, actually, like being vulnerable to the can in both sides. Actually, I'm actually not in the hiring process directly. I've been in operation team, but I've been like a mid between the candidate and the HR department. So I feel like being so transparent from both sides, being variable, and put me in situation like okay, I mustn't tell that. I mustn't why I'm doing that, and actually being vulnerable in certain situation for the system and hold. So there's a certain strategy to implement that without being vulnerable or getting your target, something like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think I've it's there is a certain level of transparency that you should bring. I do understand that. I think my viewpoint, I think, has changed massively, Ahmed, on the across the time I've, and as a man as well. I think men can be very shy to be vulnerable, or not really let people know their true feelings. And my experience, having been much more comfortable in sharing how I'm feeling, and if I'm having a bad day, being able to be brave enough to say that, I think has only resulted in positive outcomes. But I wouldn't have thought that before. So I think there's a certain level of transparency. I'm not going to go into the office crying every day, because that's just going to bring other people down, and I don't think that's the right thing to do. But being I think vulnerability is a superpower, to be fair, especially in the modern world, because I think from a diversity of thought perspective, you'll be a lot better understood. And actually, my experience of being vulnerable, it's like a domino effect, or being transparent is a domino effect. The more you lie, the more people around you will lie. The more vulnerable you are, the more vulnerable people around you will be. I've shared things that I would be terrified to share in regards to feeling really low one day, and you think you're alone, and then 10 people around you say, I feel like that, and then you feel so much better for it. So I think the more you can spread that transparency, people can't be what they can't see. So unless you as a leader, unless people in the business are being vulnerable, being transparent, people will never turn into vulnerable and transparent human beings. If more people do that, I think more people will kind of replicate that. And I equally would say that with any skill or any emotion, really, the more you do of something, the more people will feel comfortable reciprocating, which can have terrible impact as well, by the way. That's why you have terrible business cultures. People that shout at people, then their colleagues think it's acceptable to shout at people, and then they wonder that person will come to me and say, Callum, we've got a problem with our culture, and it's because that person isn't a very nice human being. So it works two ways. But the more transparent you can be, the more transparent I think people around you will be, and the more you cultivate that in your business culture. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it answered, but it's really need more power, more time. Hope to have it.
Yeah,
Thank you very
well,
much.
I'm always here.
Okay, I think we're already a few minutes over time. Does anybody have any more questions? If not, Mariam, feel free to wrap it up.
Well, since no one has any more questions, thank you so much, Callum and Anas. It was a very insightful and interesting conversation. And I think we all learned a lot today and kind of also opened our eyes to look at things in different perspectives. So thank you so much for that. And for anyone, I will also be sharing a link for Caleb's LinkedIn because he has really, really nice videos that I think you guys would be interested in also.
Perfect. And then if anyone wants to kind of take any conversations further or answer any or ask any more questions, feel free to connect on LinkedIn, and I can make time to speak to anyone who needs to chat anything through. But thank you very much as well, Mariam, Anas. Really, really enjoyable chat.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Mariam, ma'am.
Thanks.
It was a great time having you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.